And next up, please help me welcome Daniella Dimitrov, Senior Vice President and Chief Financial Officer of Calibre Mining, here for a fireside chat. Hi, great to see you. Welcome. Great opening remarks this morning.
Thank you.
It's very inspiring. Okay, so.
I have to start.
Okay.
I'm very excited to be on stage with you this morning. You and I have worked together in the past, and I'm really thrilled to be engaging in this discussion with you out of all the National Bank folks that are here. So,
don't let them hear that. Oh, wait. They can probably hear it.
So back to you now.
Okay, excellent. Well, Daniella, great to have you here for the fireside chat. And of course, you guys recently announced a major transaction, a merger with Equinox Gold. Can you talk a little bit about the rationale behind the transaction and the benefits for both sets of shareholders?
Sure. Calibre, I'll start with a bit about Calibre. Calibre was started in 2019 through an acquisition of some gold assets in Nicaragua from B2 Gold. And at that time, their focus was somewhere else. They had used the cash flow generated by the assets in Nicaragua to build other mines around the world. And when the Calibre team stepped in, the operations were producing under 100,000 ounces per year. And Calibre took that operation, refocused it, invested a lot of capital in exploration, and those assets will produce over 200,000 ounces of gold in 2025. The cash flow from Nicaragua allowed Calibre to do a small acquisition in Nevada through the acquisition of Fiore in 2022. And of course, in January 24, it acquired Marathon, who was in the process of building Valentine Gold Mine, which is said to be Atlantic Canada's largest gold mine that will produce almost 200,000 ounces when it ramps up. And Equinox went through a similar construction in a sense. It started in 2017 with the foundation, of course, of Ross Beaty and his view on where gold prices were going. And it grew through acquisition and internal growth to be an over 600,000 ounce producer. And of course, declaring commercial production at its Greenstone mine in Ontario at the end of 2024 and going through the process of ramping up. So the idea was to take really two high-quality assets at the start of their life in Canada, so one in Ontario and one in Newfoundland, and put them together under one single owner. And when these two assets ramp up, they will produce over 550,000 ounces of gold in Canada and will be Canada's second largest gold producer. So the idea was you get scale, you get jurisdictional diversification, you get to build on a foundation in Canada with over 50% of the NAV being in Canada, greater liquidity, greater attraction, hopefully to institutional investors. And so that's really the thoughts that went behind and the rationale behind putting these two companies together, and that together they can create greater value than each of them separately.
Yeah, and with Valentine going to be a cornerstone asset of the new portfolio, can you tell us a little bit about how ramp up has been going and what's next?
Sure. So we're just coming up at the tail end of construction. Mm-hmm. We recently announced a schedule update, and we're almost there. We're just around the corner. Our tailings management facility is complete. We've actually just started working on the second phase of it. Our primary crusher is complete and commissioned. Our conveyors are complete and commissioned. Our mill liners and motors are in and going through pre-commissioning. Our CIL tanks are complete and headed into pre-commissioning. Our primary focus remains piping and electrical and getting that across the line. And we're also starting to turn our attention to a phase 2. Now, a phase 2 was always in the feasibility study, going from 2.5 million tons to 4 million tons. However, that was in the second half of 2027, where we would start allocating capital towards constructing that. We're looking at bringing that forward, so we're doing some studies on that and looking at possibly taking Valentine Phase 2 to 5 million tons per year. And so our operating teams are in place. We've started mining, and we expect ore to be processed through the mill during the third quarter.
Nice. And of course, within the larger, more diversified portfolio, it's much easier to take on that expansion and bring that up earlier.
Of course, of course. I think when I look at the combined portfolio of the companies, there's a lot of catalysts in the portfolio and a lot of growth opportunities with 24 million ounces in reserves, 22 million ounces in M&I, and a lot of catalysts around the corner. So allocation of capital here will be critical.
For sure. And just focusing a little bit more on the transaction and the next steps.
Sure, yeah.
You guys recently received shareholder approval and court approval. So what are the next steps to closing?
Yes, our shareholders and Equinox Gold shareholders approved the transaction on May 1. We received court approval shortly thereafter. We're waiting for one more regulatory approval, and we really think that's around the corner, and that's from Mexico. And we continue to expect that the transaction will close before the end of June.
Nice. It's very soon.
Very soon, very soon.
And so, with this transaction almost wrapped up, how do you see the gold sector evolving? Do you expect there to be more M&A?
It's interesting. Our merger initially was an at-market merger, and we ultimately, just ahead of the shareholders' approval, the exchange ratio was updated so that there is a slight premium to the Calibre shareholders. And I always find it interesting that when the market says, we're looking for at-market mergers, and when you do an at-market merger, the market says, well, where's my premium? And yeah, you did something too early, and you could have waited until the ramp up, and they could have waited until the ramp up. But there never really is the perfect time, and opportunities really might only come along, in one moment, as I've talked about that this morning. So I think really this was our moment and these companies' moment, and they will build that value together. I have also been watching what's happening, and of course we've had some large M&A with going back to Newmont and Newcrest, and it's been just so rewarding to see portfolios being optimized and new mid-producers and major producers being created out of that portfolio optimization, out of the desire to build pipelines that might be eroding in terms of mineral inventory, out of the desire to diversify jurisdictional risk. So seeing companies like Orla, like Discovery, building off of tremendous, successful company builders themselves and teams that have delivered, we see capital rewarding those teams and backing those teams either with more capital or support in their continued growth trajectory. So yes, I do expect that we will see continued M&A. I think we should see continued M&A, and for the reasons I've talked about, which is pipelines, jurisdictional diversification, and just scale.
Yeah, and a lot of the more recent transactions have been on producing assets that have been sold and become key cornerstone assets for some of the intermediate players. Do you think the market is ready for more development? Is there appetite, or are investors still cautious?
I think I've been part of 3 builds in some capacity or another, and I love to have conversations around capital allocation on development and how do we end up where we end up with some of the developments. It is not easy to build a mine, and there are some things that are beyond our control, like fires, like weather, and we've seen the impact on some of the builds that are taking place, like Foran, like Artemis. And but a number of the reasons why we see some of the challenges in development are actually in our control. So, I've heard the comment before that, Daniella, concrete is always underestimated. To which I then say, well, if it's always underestimated, then why don't we add some for good measure? And so I think we're going to have to see the builds, and I think we're going to have to continue to build the capabilities back in our industry to do those builds, and those builds are in more challenging locations, are north of the Arctic Circle, or might be in the jungle where mobility or labor or power are things that are very challenging. So I think we will have to, and I think we will have to continue to do a better job at it.
Yeah, and especially in this spot price environment, hopefully.
Especially in the spot price environment that we're in, at least on the gold side.
Exactly. And in terms of the gold price, do you have a prediction? How do you think about the material gap between current spot price and a long-term consensus? Why is there such a big gap, and how do you see the market dynamics going forward?
Yeah, I feel like I'm starting to sound a little bit old. I ran into a former colleague of mine, a CFO of a company with a mine in northern Spain, and that's mining, 3.5 grams per ton underground. And I used to be the CFO and then the CEO when gold was at 1,100. And we were reminiscing to say, wow, those are the times. I barely thought we would make payroll some quarters. And here we are at over $3,000 gold. And we've had the opportunity to delever balance sheets. We've had the opportunity to return capital to shareholders through dividends and buybacks. And we have the opportunity to continue to generate tremendous cash flow. I don't see any reasons why gold prices are going to decline, at least in the near term. We're seeing the same geopolitical tensions. We're seeing a weakness in the Canadian dollar. We're seeing a lot of volatility in geopolitics. And so I expect that we'll continue to see above $3,000 gold for the rest of this year, next year. And I know there's some analysts out there that are predicting, $3,700 gold later on this year. And I think Goldman Sachs is doing that. So I expect the strong price to continue.
Nice, and certainly a good time to be a gold producer.
Good time to be a gold producer with a large mineral inventory.
Absolutely. Okay, so in the remaining time that we have, about call it a minute and a half, 2 minutes, can you give us, maybe just the highlights of why an investor should buy the new Calibre Equinox?
Sure. I had the opportunity to work with a new team when I joined Calibre, and that's the former principals and some of the management team behind Newmarket Gold. And Newmarket Gold merged with Kirkland Lake a number of years ago, bringing together two high-quality assets in Tier 1 jurisdictions. And following that merger, Kirkland Lake became the top-performing stock on the TSX in an 18-month period following the closing of the acquisition. And when I hear those stories, I wasn't involved in that acquisition specifically, but when I hear those stories, it's around the same time, that there was some pushback to the merger, and a number of investors and stakeholders didn't think that the merger made sense. And it's the same team and principals that see the exact same opportunity here and bringing Greenstone and Valentine together, and the rationale for that. And M&A value isn't created overnight or in one quarter. M&A is done for the long term. And when we look at these two companies, we see, again, 550,000 ounces plus in Canada, over 50% of the NAV in Canada, a tremendous mineral inventory between the two combined companies, a focus on exploration. Calibre alone is drilling 200,000 meters this year in Nicaragua and in Newfoundland. Mm-hmm. And tremendously catalyst-rich. So ramp-up of Greenstone, completion of Valentine, phase 2 of Valentine, Los Filos CIL, and settling an agreement with communities there and permitting Castle Mountain. It's a lot in the pipeline for this company. And of course, with these gold prices, looking to delever the balance sheet and further optimize capital structure and capital allocation. So a lot to see in the next 6, 12, 18 months.
Very exciting. Well, congrats again on the transaction.
Thank you very much. And again,
you.
a pleasure to see you and share the stage with you. And look forward to chatting after.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniella.